This is Tim Jones. I'm the Artistic Director of the Seymour Centre, and I'm talking with Emmanuelle Mattana, who is the writer and performer of our upcoming Seymour season production of Trophy Boys. Hi, Emmanuelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, so your show, Trophy Boys, opened in Melbourne in early 2022, I think.
We did one at the end of 2022 and one at the start of 2023.
2023, sorry.
Yep. No, you're good.
Okay, the Melbourne Age Review, I'm going to start there,
Yep.
of that performance said, among many things, theatre lovers should rush to see Trophy Boys, the hilarious and devastating debut play from Emmanuelle Mattana. The script is powerful and ferociously intelligent, the performance is witty and exuberant and, crucially, empathetic. Trophy Boys is a revelation. So that's a pretty good response to a first play.
Nice.
That's
I'll
nice.
take it.
You'll take it?
Yeah.
Okay, so before we delve into why you wrote it, can we start by you telling us a little bit about you? I know you went to Sydney Girls High.
I did go to Sydney Girls High. Yep.
So what happened between Sydney Girls High and the opening night of Trophy Boys?
About 5 and a bit years happened. So I was a competitive debater in high school and I liked a lot of things about it because I was a very political young person and I liked that it gave me the ability to think about things in depth and to be taken seriously and have opinions. And there were lots of things that I really did not like about it, notably the sort of environment of elitism. And there was a culture that sat really uncomfortably with me. So when I finished high school, I realised I preferred art than politics and policy to make change. And I sort of moved to Melbourne, became a big old queer, lived my best life. And it wasn't until the allegations against Christian Porter, which were actually historical allegations from a national debating tournament, came to light, that I felt compelled to sort of revisit that time in my life. And the result was this play.
So just before, we'll come back to the Christian Porter thing and that motivation in a second, but the actual choice to write a play, had that, writing plays in general, had that kind of been germinating for a while, or was this kind of like, I've read this article and I'm going to write a play?
No, I think it was, for me it is just one of the many avenues of creative expression. I started as a performer in television land and so had been doing that for years and had this real sort of tangible sense of the capacity that art had to sort of start conversations and especially engage with young people. Like I came from kids television and there was a real sense that we could say important things that could change perspectives and move conversation forward. So I think for me it was just that theatre felt like the space to tell this story. I always knew that there was something about a debating prep room that was inherently very theatrical, this sort of like closed space, real-time, 1 hour pressure cooker that was really exciting theatrically to me. So, I think as soon as the little idea bubbled away, it was always going to be a theatre show.
The thing that impressed me, and many things impressed me about the show, but and this is the last question I'll ask about playwriting per se, but is that you either seem to have a natural knack for the craft, which is pretty extraordinary. I'm talking about character, I'm talking about story development, I'm talking about turning points. In one sense, it's quite a conventional play in that it's, one location and it's a kind of naturalistic location.
Aristotle's stoked with it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So is it, was that kind of just something that came natural, or did you actually go and do a playwriting course?
No. I've never formally studied playwriting at all. Everything I've learnt has been by being a big old nerd who reads a lot and watches a lot, but I think also having approached storytelling as a performer, being a young performer who gets to be inside story a lot from that perspective gave me a real sense of what worked, what didn't work, but also like what I liked and what I wanted to be a part of. So everything was really informed by, I kind of came into it going, I want to write a character for myself. And at the time, I know, so selfish. But, at the time I was auditioning for a lot of 16-year-old girls who Australian television loves 16-year-old girls that are a bit sad, bit downcast. And I went, I'm sad, but maybe in a very different way. So I was interested in, creating a story that felt like it could be fun and interesting and different for me to play, and just went from there.
So can you snapshot the story of Trophy Boys.
Yeah. So Trophy Boys is a black comedy and drag extravaganza about power, privilege, and high school debating. It's set in the 1 hour prep window before the grand final debate between the St. Imperium boys, who are from an elite all-boys private school. They're played by female and non-binary performers in drag, and they're versing their sister school for this huge debating final, which, the stakes of the world ride upon, of course. And they go into the prep room and they receive the topic that feminism has failed women, affirmative. And so we follow these boys as they try and work their way through the sticky eggshells of feminism without mansplaining and without getting themselves cancelled. And it's very silly and very funny until some anonymous sexual assault allegations make their way to light, and the play sort of enters a different space and forces us to question the ways that these attitudes that young men are conditioned to perform and believe and engage with are actually much more insidious and dangerous than we originally think.
You said you were yourself a debater.
Yes.
And
Yep.
and Playwriting 101 is write what you know,
Yep.
to start off with. Was there any topics that were similar to this that you debated? Or, And what did what was your favourite or least favourite topic?
Ooh, what was my favourite or least favourite topic? I mean, I loved everything. Like, that was the problem. And I think that's the thing about debating that's really interesting is, like, ideas and arguments lose all sense of, like, their emotional depth and what they actually mean to people because they become these, like, exciting intellectual challenges. You can sort of take things and, like, fling them to mean different things. And I think when I was in the depths of my debating culture, that was a really exciting thing. And in retrospect, I actually think it's a really scary thing, the way that logic and argumentation can be used to say things you don't really believe in. So back in the day, I was always really excited by topics that had a possibility to go either way, and the nuance of that. Whereas now I think I get much more excited by my convictions and by honouring those, irrespective of what the topic is.
Yeah. So is debating, in your view, still, is it a worthwhile educational training, thing to do?
I think it's important that young people get taught how to think critically. I think that is absolutely missing from most curriculums. I think the capacity to think critically, engagement with current affairs, engagement with international politics, those sorts of things are really missing. And I think it's important that we teach young people frameworks of argumentation and interrogation and also just articulation, right? Like, debating is just spoken essay writing. And I think that we're increasingly in a time where people don't have the capacity to engage in complex issues and debate. Like, that is something that's really missing. I don't necessarily think that debating as a framework is the right way to do it because it turns argument into competition, right? As opposed to argument into discussion. And I don't think arguments necessarily need to be won or lost, but I think we need to engage with the rigor of what those arguments are.
Yeah.
So, benefits to debating, but also, like, a real culture that needs to be examined, especially the way that, like, within Sydney debating circles, debating is dominated by very elite private schools. And there's a real sense that, like, if you are smart enough and articulate enough, you can talk over anybody and that makes you correct. I think there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen there. Yeah.
Going back to the play for a second.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
No, it's good. You mentioned in the beginning that it's a drag extravaganza. And one of the central layers of meaning in this play is that you call for the 4 male characters to be played by female or female identifying or non-binary performers.
Yep.
Was that always the idea from the start? I did remember that you said you wanted to write yourself something. But was there, how critical was that? Was there ever a moment that you thought, actually, maybe this does need to be played by men to really make the points I want to make? Or, like, did they go hand in hand? Or was it just like, oh my God, that's actually a great idea, first draft?
I don't think there is a world in which this play can be done by cis men. Couple of reasons. See, I'm doing my little debating thing. Firstly, I think it's like an audience safety and a care thing, right? Like, what we are doing by having female and non-binary performers instead of men is letting the audience know that we're in on the joke.
Yep.
We're going, you can laugh at this. This is safe. This is the opportunity. Like, there is no threat here. I think that is really important in terms of what the piece is. It's also about this sense of us like reclaiming the violence as women and non-binary folk and queer folk that has been put upon us by these sorts of private school boys. So those are sort of big things in terms of the staging and why it's really important to me that drag exists. But I think there's also a much bigger conversation happening at the moment around gender. Like, more broadly, I think that is sort of the zeitgeist that we're in right now, which is really exciting. But I think acknowledging the ways in which we're starting to realise gender is a performance that gets constructed. And especially when you talk about masculinity and young boys, I think there's this real experience of boys feeling like they get taught how to perform masculinity and the way they behave and the way they treat women and the way they treat each other isn't something that's necessarily innate, but something that is placed upon them, and then they learn to perform as they become men. And I'm really interested in the way that sometimes it takes that performance being performed by a non-cis male body for us to recognise what that actually is. It's more about like highlighting the fact that this is performed, this is, there's nothing innate about it.
No, but interestingly, I would argue that it has to have a level of detail and accuracy so that impersonation, for want of a better word, isn't kind of just dismissed as two-dimensional.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think is great about this piece is that they are three-dimensional characters.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's like you always have to approach this with a sense of compassion. Like, this isn't just about shitting on boys. It's about shitting on a system that forces boys to behave that way and like viewing the real tragedy of that. That, I mean, I have a baby brother who I love and adore, and he's like so at the heart of this for me, because I think it's we do our men and our young boys such a disservice by expecting them to go from beautiful young boys who have a capacity to show emotion and care and be sensitive, and we try and knock that out of boys. I don't think that's it doesn't serve women, obviously, but it also doesn't serve those boys. And I think we need to do better by them.
Yeah. What's it like performing your own work? Like, what's it like actually being in your play when you've written the words? Do you kind of look at another actor and think, actually, you got that line wrong?
No, because I'm not
Or
an
are you-
asshole. No,
Yeah.
no, it's a surprising amount of fun is actually what it is. There's obviously a little voice that goes, oh, this is terrible and you're terrible and you should never write ever again. But we live with that voice. We're used to her. I think especially because it's drag, it's really, really enjoyable. I think a lot of the performance features have meant I can take off the perfectionist hat, and also I can take up more space. That's the thing we found playing drag, is all of us were like, oh, we can sit up bigger and we can be louder and we can fill space, and we don't have to be beautiful or right or small or interesting or quaint. Like, it actually is a completely different way of performing that has been so energizing and brilliant.
So when you started rehearsing this, you and the other actors felt that kind of instinctive reaction. You noticed that thing that if I was playing a female character, I would be doing this. But actually, now that I've got the license to do something else, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a freedom that is really exciting and really liberating. Yeah.
Wow.
It's very cool.
It's very fascinating.
I would recommend everyone do drag.
Yes.
I start doing it now just for fun. Like, I'll go to a party and I'll be like, I'll call my friend up. I'll go, hey, is this the sort of party I can wear a mustache to? And they'll be like, sure. And I'll like rock up in my mustache. Just feels right.
Right. Oh. And then do you start swaggering around the party?
Absolutely. Sometimes I just like hold a skateboard just for fun.
that'd be
Sometimes
good.
I've got my little guitar. I'm like, who wants Wonderwall? You know, it's a whole thing. I've found the character and now it lives in me. Yeah.
Very good. Actually, about the characters, in your character descriptions and then obviously as they're revealed in the play, they're incredibly specific. Are they real people? Are they people you know?
Legally speaking, no. No. Maybe no. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Okay.
They're archetypes. They're archetypes inspired by...
Yeah, but they're definitely not stereotypes.
No, I hope. I think they begin in stereotypes and then maybe as the play moves on, we sort of encounter more truth. Yeah.
But I just love that, just the nuances there about the values that they hold, appear to hold, but actually don't really hold. Their knowledge of Malala, for example, the knowledge of Michelle Obama or whoever else is pretty detailed.
Has to be, doesn't it? So
They've
that they
done
can
some
talk
work.
their talk.
They can talk their talk.
Yeah.
So then taking that as a lead to talk about toxic masculinity.
What a buzzword.
What a buzzword.
Yep.
Okay, so the play hovers around and then directly addresses the issue of consent. Despite the kind of extreme wokeness of the characters in the piece. Ultimately, I wonder, are you saying the more things change, the more they stay the same?
In terms of we think we're making leaps and bounds, but
Yes,
we're really
correct.
not?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Like, I think it's less about the more things change, the more things stay the same, and more about how are people in positions of power pretending that that they no longer have that power whilst continuing to hold on to it, right? And it's all about men who are able to talk the talk without necessarily walking the walk. I think that's more what it is about in terms of the space we're in now, where everyone has a real awareness around ethics and inequality and justice. But that doesn't necessarily, it means they can intellectually understand these things, but they're not applied yet. And I think that's a really interesting space we're in right now. And also, I think it's about backlash culture. Like, it's about the way in which young boys, and especially young straight white boys, suddenly feel like the world is against them.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real issue because there's no way for them to navigate that sense that they're being hard done by. And I think it's more about the response that young men are having to this cultural moment.
Feedback from young men to the Melbourne season so far, what's that been like?
Really, really positive.
Yeah.
Something that's been really lovely especially is lots of men in their sort of early 20s who actually came out of private schools who have responded so positively and said that this work was something that was really healing for them. I think that has been the greatest gift. We knew we were making something that was political and funny and important, but I think the biggest gift has actually been just how personal it's been and the way that a lot of men have been moved to tears watching this behaviour reflected back at them or have been using this as a sort of tool to reckon with their own past and the ways in which they were complicit in things that weren't right by them. I think that's been like the most special part of it.
Because there is a great peer pressure element to it where these guys, we think they're kind of going down one direction, but they get, despite their intellectual prowess, they're easily influenced, aren't they? Or there is a element of siding and who's going in which direction and going with the pack.
Yeah, it's pack mentality and it's safety and it's how do these boys, they protect one another, right? And I think that is sort of this big thing is we look at the boys' clubs that are formed in private boys' schools and then suddenly you look in Parliament and, 30, 40, 50 years later, those allegiances still exist, right? We're still watching men protect each other because it's safest for them to do that. I think that's the really interesting thing.
I wanted to ask about anger.
Oh, please.
Now, this may be right or may be wrong, but the play is obviously very funny.
Stop it.
But I would also say there's an element of anger there. You say in your writer's note to the play that you were living, as you said before, in a relatively carefree student life, and then the historic sexual assault allegation against Attorney General Christian Porter was made public, and that it rocked you in ways you would never have anticipated. Can you just talk a bit more about that? And is that an anger that kind of fuels part of the play? Yeah,
well, something that our director, Marnie, and I talk about. So Marnie and I met at a national debating tournament in 2016. I was a high school debater and she was one of the university facilitators. And something that we always talked about kind of jokingly in those circles is we would be like, oh yeah, we've met the future Prime Minister. Like we don't know who it is, but it's like someone here. We know them. And that was something we sort of spoke about quite flippantly. And then having that realization that actually after the Christian Porter allegations, like it would be completely unacceptable if it was any of the people here. Like how dare that happen? How deeply upsetting would that be, right? Like, and angering. And I think when it becomes more and more obvious, like the ways in which those particular environments cultivate the people who get into positions of power, and seeing the way that those people act when they are 16, 17, it's repulsive and it's frightening. And I very well could have stayed in that circle and pursued law and pursued politics, and I felt like it was not within my ethical framework to continue to do so. And I think so many people who have the capacity to make great change and make the world a better place leave spaces like politics and debating because they feel like there's no way to be aligned with that, and that they need to make the world a better place somewhere else. So yeah, I think there's a lot of rage of this sense that and a kind of really deep realization that the people who are getting themselves into positions of power are not fit for that.
And in the interest of a kind of balanced interview, I guess, in one sense.
Oh, yeah, go on.
I mean, I guess you're not saying every person who was a debater is going to be, an arrogant, but power hungry.
Not even, like, I'm definitely not saying that. I think what I'm saying is that there are aspects of the culture of debating in which you are encouraged to spin truth, to use argument as a tool to win and to conquer, and to be the smartest in the room at the expense of the realities of the sorts of political circumstances you're talking about and who they actually affect, that engenders a sort of a distance from the people who you're actually supposed to be helping with these arguments.
Well, the other thing that I think is great about the play is that what is reality? What is truth? What are my morals, and what am I actually going to, my values, what am I actually going to say that I believe in and stick to becomes rubbery.
Yeah, exactly. Or what do you say versus how do you act? I think is the big question, and how much of it is pretense.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't trust politicians at the best of times, but I think that is much more of it's a deeply ethical question of when you can say certain things that get you ahead and win you points. What does that do to you?
Well, you see that in Question Time, don't you? It's actually what the issue is sort of to the side, to the kind of the debate.
Yeah, to speaking around the issue.
Speaking around the issue.
Yeah.
And scoring the point, and that's kind of the system, isn't it? And what's interesting about this place is kind of seeing those nascent boys at that particular time where I think you say it in the writer's note, something about, they're smart. Their brains are kind of like in overdrive in one sense.
Yeah.
And they're not in another.
And I think also it's so much more interesting when you talk about masculinity. I think there's this real tendency to be like toxic, dopey men, rugby, rah, that doesn't actually acknowledge. I think when you make any argument or when you're trying to engage with that, you have to take it at its best and at its most intelligent. And I think it's a lot harder but a lot more rewarding to be engaging with actually the intelligence of these men and young boys.
Speaking of young people, I know that before the show comes to the Seymour Centre, it's in Geelong and also at the Arts Centre in Melbourne. It will be doing school shows there, as it will here. What do you sort of hope young people at school will take away from this?
Well, it's been included on the curriculum for VCE, so I'm just hoping that they write really good essays about me. I'm hoping they slide into my DMs on Instagram and go, so what did you mean when you wrote this? And I'll say, I don't know what I meant. No. I think I'm hoping that it's an opportunity for more conversation. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, but I think it's also an opportunity for healing. Some of the most rewarding conversations I've had in the foyers after the shows was with girls who were still in high school and who felt like watching a show like this was really emboldening, and that they went, oh, we can actually speak up against the things that we're seeing. Like, we're not making this up. These are our experiences, and they deserve to be listened to and heard, and they deserve to be platformed on a stage, and we deserve to study them, and that those sorts of voices are really important. I don't take for granted at all that I'm a very young female playwright and that this is a work that I wrote when I was 21, and the fact that it is able to directly communicate with other young women is really, really, really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great.
And also I will add, it's very much a show that has young people at its heart, but I do think it's for everyone. We had such a really diverse audience in terms of age who were engaging with it. And one of the things that was actually the most rewarding was that my parents and the parents of all my peers who, especially mums, who sort of would come to us with just this immense gratitude. And my mum said something that I love where she sort of, and my mum, I love it a bit, but she's not like heavy on the praise. Yeah, that's fine. I get it. But she said, like, I'm incredibly grateful that your generation just will not take the shit that we had to deal with. And I think that is at the heart of it, is this real sense of like, I'm not copping it. We don't have to. And I'm so sorry that there were generations of women who dealt with this stuff, not just in schools, but in their workplaces for decades. Yeah. And I think it's, really important that older women can hopefully be inspired by the fact that there's a new generation who are not taking any shit.
And this might be sort of a question on the same line, but what is your advice for other young people who want to get into theatre? I mean, how do you see theatre at the moment and where it might be going for the type of theatre you want to make in the future?
I think you just have to do it. I am a real perfectionist and I stop myself from doing a lot of things because I don't think that they're going to be good enough. And I think I've had to realise that doesn't serve anyone. It's important to remember that your writing and your work and your voice and the sharing of those things, it's generous. Like, it's a generous act to share. And I think especially women and people from other marginalisations get told to shrink themselves and to take up less space and to feel like anything they do share is like impinging on anybody else. And I think it's really important to have a real sense of authenticity about like the fact that you are allowed to say exactly what you want to say and that there is a space for it, and institutions and people who give you money will probably not recognise that, and that's okay. Like, continue to do it anyway and trust that I think there's a really exciting change happening amongst young audiences, and it's sort of easier than ever to get your stuff out there. So yeah, I think it's just more important to be aligned with what you want to say, but also who you want to say it to, like connecting with your communities, whoever they are, and being in service of that.
What would you like to see more of in independent theatre in Australia / performance, whatever?
More fun, more silliness, more playfulness. I always talk about how the work I want to make and the work I'm really interested in exists at the intersection of the playful and the political. I think things are really bleak. I think young people especially are feeling it, and I think there are only so many things we can do to feel connected. I think that theatre at its heart should always be about bringing people together, and my own particular brand of bringing people together is with a lot of silliness. I'm really interested in irreverence and camp and fun and over the top, and I'm excited by what we can continue to bring to that space.
And what is it you don't want to see when you go to the theatre?
Shakespeare.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sorry.
Ah, that's interesting. No, it's good.
Yeah, look, Shakespeare aside, I think what I don't want to see is voices that I've seen before. I think what is exciting in theatre is new ways of doing things. And I think that the theatre is really going to have to compete with a whole new array of digital technologies. So how can we find what is really, really special about being in a room with a bunch of other bodies breathing and listening at once? I think as soon as there is any sort of complacency about this is what theatre is and has been and has to be, that's when it dies.
Well done, you.
Cheers.
Okay. So I should say this. We can't wait for Trophy Boys. So we're presenting at Seymour 19 June to 7 July. And thank you very much, Emmanuelle Mattana. Congratulations, and looking forward to seeing you at the Seymour soon.
Cheers. We'll see you there.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.